Welcome to our podcast. This is Friends on Fire.
I'm Mike. I'm a lifelong devotee of financial independence. I even wrote a book about it.
And I'm Maggie, a newer convert, but just as passionate, especially on the intersection of minimalism and financial independence.
We're one and the same.
We are two like-minded friends who believe that talking about money with your friends and family opens the door to financial well-being.
The Friends on Fire podcast is about dispelling myths, building financial acumen, and sharing your financial independence journey with the people you care about.
This is Friends on Fire.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Maggie.
How's it going?
Going great. How are you?
Okay.
You're ready to jump in. Let's do it.
I'm ready to jump in because there's been a little bit of a challenge. This is a topic that I'm going to want to talk about a lot. And I said, no, I think we could do it in under 40 minutes. So here we go.
All right.
Okay. So this week's episode was inspired by a DM that we got as a direct message for my mom, really, who's the only one who probably doesn't know what that is, on Instagram from a listener who was very kind, said she loved the show and she was looking for an episode on talking to her partner about money. And she was like, I kind of looked through it. I didn't really think you guys had any episodes. And I said, you're right. We have some about talking to your friends. We really have not talked a lot about this topic. We kind of we talk about it in different episodes, but not as a focused discussion. So I asked her to give us a little more details, just to share some real life examples. And I'm going to share that just to kick off this discussion. And then we're going to get into a discussion about talking to your partner about money, the benefits of it, and some tips and advice.
Okay, great.
Okay, so this person said, I'm 30. I've been investing for years using an employer-sponsored 401k, not really knowing what I was doing, and I'm almost at six figures. That's awesome. Then they said, during the pandemic, I found the budgeting, investing, financial freedom community and jumped on the bandwagon. I love it. My partner has been receptive to my financial suggestions regarding eliminating debt and improving his credit score. We have a joint account where we deposit an agreed equal amount on a set time frame to pay shared living expenses, and he does save regularly, but I don't think it's a strategic amount. He's not interested in budgeting, doesn't feel he makes enough money right now to invest. He makes plenty, and gets kind of defensive when I do want to talk about him doing those things. We don't see eye to eye on our future home purchase. He wants to purchase a home $50K more than I believe is necessary, as I would like to live below our means. I love hearing that from her. He wants to purchase a new build home in a growing area where the home's equities are growing tremendously. He thinks it will be a good investment. I, on the other hand, am willing to live in an older home to have a lower payment and am concerned about the taxes in the area he's interested in becoming unaffordable with the growth. So the taxes becoming unaffordable. Money has been passed down to him to contribute to the down payment, which I'm willing to match. However, he doesn't believe it's necessary to use it all for the home purchase, which I don't agree with. We have a good line of communication. However, our money mindsets are totally different. He wants to splurge on life right now while I am focused on fire. I recognize I can be a little aggressive in my presentation. If you can give me some advice on how to talk to him more productively and how to manage these differences. Also, maybe touch on prenups. I'm in love, but I'm a realist. And then she said, sorry, that was so long. Like Maggie, I need to provide context. And then I was just like, oh my gosh, you're awesome. And you listen to the show enough to know that I talk a lot and provide a lot of context, according to Kate Flanders.
I feel like half of our messages call out the fact that
I know
they're my favorite. Providing just as much context as you like to do.
They're my favorite. Okay. So I also, Mike, in preparation for the show, I put something up on Instagram asking kind of, what other questions people had about talking to their partners about money. I did a little survey and asked people how many people they felt like were on the same page with their partners versus not. And this is a little bit of a bias survey because we're already dealing with people that are, following a financial account on Instagram. But 75% of people pleasantly said that they do feel like they're on the same page with their partners. About 25% of people said they did not. So that was interesting. And then also some of the other things people asked about were, how to discuss what each person values if it's not the same, best practices on managing money together, thoughts on combined or separate bank accounts, reasons to have more than one. We did a whole show on combined versus split finances, which we'll put in the show notes. And then knowing how they said, this is actually a really interesting one. Someone said, and this is a big fan that I've spoken to before. He said his wife, knowing how good our net worth is, actually makes her anxious and less disciplined. So she doesn't even want to know. So I think like knowing it's almost an interesting, it's like a, first world problem for sure. Right.
Yeah.
So that's a unique situation. Well, probably not that unique, but sometimes people don't want to know because it's so bad, but I like not wanting to know how good you are, because then maybe you'll start spending more money or something. And then the one other comment we got from someone is, people worrying about our partner's parents' looming debt and no end in sight of them retiring soon, worried about it getting passed down to their partner, which is interesting because your parents' debt really doesn't get passed down to your partner. If something happens to them. Let's focus on the first discussion. And then we'll try to kind of hit some of these individual ones at the end if we have time.
Question. Am I going to be allowed to speak in this episode?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
For sure. Is that all you need to say? Are you good?
Yeah, I'm good. You can
Okay.
do the rest of the show notes.
Well, that was your speaking. I just gave you like 6 words to say.
All right. So we are going to share some advice on how you can talk to your partner and improve your financial relationship with each other.
So I think just to start with something, it's really important to talk about money with your partner. Even if you come from different backgrounds and perspectives, this is a topic you need to be able to talk about openly and get to some common ground and practices on. And I often think about, all of the things that you talk about in a relationship, Mike, like when you were thinking about, someone you wanted to marry or getting into a serious relationship, weren't there like things you wanted to make sure they were on the same page about? Like,
yeah,
money. You wanted, oh, sorry, well, that's a silly question to you, but like, did you know you want kids? You wanted kids. And if you had found out that someone you were dating didn't want kids, would that have been a deal breaker for you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I would equate money to topics like kids, religion, political views, the things that are deal breakers to you, the things that are, and it doesn't mean that they have to have the same views as you coming in, but it to me is important that they need to be willing to talk about those topics. So I know people who are on the fence about having kids, but they're certainly not like, I won't even discuss it with you, right? You're wrong, I'm right, whatever it is, right? They can't like shut down when you have that conversation, or it's just not a good start to a relationship. And so, look, I know there's some people who are already in relationships and they've been in relationships for, long periods of time, and that's when they're having trouble talking about money. And so that's very different. But I will say, when you're at the point where you're choosing to have choosing who to build a relationship with and who to, have a long-term relationship with. And if they're not willing to talk about money at some point, not on the first date, but at some point in the relationship, that's a red flag, right? It should be something that you guys are able to talk about. Like, did you and Britta like talk about your financial, thoughts and priorities?
Of course we did. Come on.
Was it on your first date?
It might have been on our first date.
Wouldn't be surprised. But the other thing is, it's never too late, right? So, and I think that my like rally cry to people in relationships is stand your ground, right? We're going to get into some specific advice, but like, don't think that this is just a topic you can't discuss. You have a right to have this discussion with your partner, whether it is on your first date, which again, I'm not recommending, whether it is early on as you're building your relationship, or whether it is 10, 20 years into a marriage. You can bring up financial discussions, right? We're going to give you specific tactical tips and advice for how to do that in a helpful way. I'm not saying like, steamroll people and, be judgmental and condescending, but I am saying don't back down. Don't be afraid to have these discussions, and don't think that it isn't your right to have these discussions. And it is your right to be in a healthy relationship where you're able to talk about things like money. That is owed to every single person that's in a relationship.
And I think one of the big differences between those other types of conversations that you mentioned, politics, religion, for instance, is that those you can sort of, to some degree, avoid. Like, you don't have to really talk a lot about if one person believes in God or not, for example, or what your political views on corporate taxes or entitlement programs are. Like, that stuff can sort of be avoided. And I look at my parents. My dad, for a long time, conservative. My mom, very liberal. And so that they have a very happy marriage. So that sort of stuff can kind of go under the bridge. With money, you are making financial decisions multiple times a day. They will have a dramatic impact on your life decisions at every point. where you live, what type of house you buy, where you go on vacation, where your kids go to school. Like, you cannot avoid it, and you will be forced to discuss it. The tactical decisions being made on a daily basis. This is a very important discussion.
So on that note, Mike, of how important of a discussion it is, by the way, I was going to get into like my thoughts on whether you actually can brush like, different political or religious beliefs under the rug, but we don't have time for that today. But I agree. I think there's plenty of happy relationships where, and I've been in them, where you have different religious views and different political views. So on your note about how important it is for a relationship versus other topics, there's some interesting stats that I think are just helpful to remind you why this matters and how important being on the same page and even just having open communication is about money. So these are stats from a bunch of different sources. I'm not going to cite them. This isn't like I don't know what to call this podcast, but I'm not citing our sources.
Well, as long as they're not 99%, I know they didn't come from you. So please
I found
continue.
them on Google, the internet. They're definitely accurate.
Yeah.
Anyways, they're directional. You'll get the idea. So here's a few stats. Feeling that one's spouse spent money foolishly increased the likelihood of divorce by 45% for both men and women.
Another stat, couples that argue about finances at least once a week are 30% more likely to get a divorce.
Higher annual incomes can decrease the risk of divorce, and couples that build wealth together versus debt together have a higher success
And various studies, which are nameless, cite that 30 to 40% of divorces happen over disagreements about money. Money fighting is the second leading cause of divorce behind infidelity.
So our point is, it's super important to get aligned with your partner on money. And aside from the kind of negative angle of like, if you don't, it could lead to divorce, which is what many of these stats say, it can lead to so much positivity. We did an episode number 23 titled Happiness, Sex, and Money, where we talked all about how improving your finances can increase your mental health, your physical health, your self-esteem, your sex life, your overall happiness. And so, again, you can focus on the negative angle of like what can go wrong if you don't do this. But I like to focus on the positive angle, glass half full, of like so much can be better about your relationship when you get on the same page about this.
It's teamwork.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
So you do better as a team, your finances do better. And as a result, you make progress towards your goals faster and you're happier. So there's kind of two totally disparate sides of the spectrum here. You can not align and you can fight about it and eventually get divorced, or you can become a team and work together on aligned goals and achieve those goals faster.
Yeah. And even if you're not aligned and you don't fight about it and you're like, well, we're not aligned, but we don't actively fight about it, brushing things under the rug and having built up resentment that so-and-so won't talk about it and you're not on the same page, that's not good either, right? That is just very unhealthy for a relationship. So let's talk about our tips and tactics for talking to your partner about money. These are ideas for opening up the conversation.
Yeah, this is not a checklist.
Yes. Well, you might, some of these we might suggest in order as you listen to them, but some of them are just kind of, peppered in. So the first one we're going to cover might be the one that actually is in numerical order. The rest are all, kind of randomly ordered. But the first one is, before you just jump into like, hey, I think we need to start budgeting, or I think, oh, why'd you spend so much money on that thing? We have too much debt, whatever. Like, accusatory statements are not a good place to start. A great place to start conversations about money actually aren't exactly about money. It's about life goals, right? So start a conversation with your partner about your life goals. Figure out your why, your individual whys, your combined whys. Talk about what's important to you, what's important to your spouse. Like, ask them questions and listen. So ask questions like, how long do you want to work? How do you envision your retirement? What are your dreams in life? What are you afraid of? What are your fears? If you have kids or you plan to have kids, talk about like what's important for them regarding schooling, how they think about college, how they think about cars, and just all sorts of things. Like, I think it's really about starting to focus on your goals in life and your why for why you or your partner would care about any financial topic in the first place.
And I think the most important in my experience would have been the third bullet on that list, Maggie. It's like, what are your dreams? what do you want your life to look like?
Yeah.
And that doesn't have to be the same in every regard. Now, if one of you wants to stop working at 30 and go live on a farm in Europe, and the other one wants to work until 50 and have kids and live in the United States, that's kind of different. But if you just have different hobbies, but you both want to live in the same place, or you both want to have kids, or like you share the major life decisions, then this can help you align on the tactical things that you need to do. And so Britta and I have talked about this quite frequently. It's like, what do you want your life to look like when we stop working? And she wants to travel the world and continue to compete in swimming. I want to travel the world with the kids and do fun travel videos. Those things work together, and that helps us align on our financial strategy.
Well, another question that I like that's around the same angle, Mike, is what makes you happy, right? So we did a list there. This is from the movie Playing with Fire, but I'm sure, or the book also. And I did this with my husband, and we've talked about it on the show before. But like, ask your partner to make a list and like write down the 10 things that make them happiest in life, right? And you might notice a lot of them often don't cost money. But this is around like your goals and your why. And like, you want to, Mike, I know it's important for you to like be present for your kids, and same for me. And that was a big thing that you felt from your parents when they retired early, is that they were present and there for you. And that might be an example of kind of your dreams, right? Aside from even traveling, is like, I want to be available and present for my kids. I don't want to miss their childhood, which only lasts about 18 years. And so I think, it's just that's the most important piece. And the best part about starting on this piece is it is less confrontational than getting into, again, just straight into like, hardcore financial topics. You start there and you warm them up and you get on the same page. And so that's our first tip. The next one is like, be vulnerable. Don't come at people aggressively. Don't come at your partner aggressively. It doesn't matter if you think they're typically okay in that, sort of approach, but be willing to kind of like admit your own mistakes. Consider starting with yourself before you even encourage them in any way on this journey, right? So you can start telling your spouse about what you're doing. See if they willingly jump on board. You don't want to push too hard until you've got your own house in order. The thing where you may have to kind of swallow your pride here in kind of starting with yourself, being able to like look at yourself before you get too aggressive with your partner, is you might think, oh, well, they're worse at this than I am, right? They're spending all this money and, whatever. But it might actually work better for you to start with yourself and then start to talk to them about it and kind of pepper it into things and say, hey, like I'm going to do a no spend challenge this month, and don't force them into doing it. Ask if they want to participate, but you don't have to force them. Like, kind of just, start small, start with yourself. I think a lot can be gained by getting your own house in order before trying to poke holes in somebody else's house, even when they're in the same house as you, which hopefully they are if they're, or maybe you're in a relationship and you're not yet married.
So the next point is to make the conversation non-confrontational. And this is something that I will be a little vulnerable here, Maggie, and admit that I am not very good at. Not because I am being confrontational, but because I am like very direct and matter of fact when it comes to money. Yeah. And so people think that I'm coming at them like in a confrontational manner.
Yeah, it's just not your style.
It's just not my style. Even though I get a lot of people who like come to me for advice and enjoy talking to me about money. There are people who really don't like talking about it with me because they feel as though I am coming at it in a confrontational manner, and it turns
aggressively.
Them off.
Yeah. I'm the same way, honestly. I've even had good friends tell me that. But I think the interesting thing here is you catch more bees with honey, right? So even though like if you were, now you don't need to like adjust your style for friends and family and others, you don't have to, but if you're trying to get somewhere with your partner, one of my favorite like marriage quotes is, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Which is like basically a motto for marriage or all relationships. You need to do what is best for your relationship. So if you're the one that is further along on your financial views of where you want to get to than your partner is, you need to recognize that a more loving and kind and vulnerable approach is going to get you further. And this is like, I read this in an article a while back. Like, you might even like when you're trying to have this discussion, like hold your partner's hand, sit next to them on the couch and like touch them, because like human touch can really change somebody's demeanor, and they won't get as defensive or aggressive with you. And so again, your partner, if that's what works for them, versus if they really don't like being touched, then don't touch them during this conversation. And to be clear, I'm just saying like touch their hand. Just hold their hand, just like a loving touch. I mean, I guess you could try having this conversation while you're being intimate, but that's a whole nother level of like how to make some progress on this discussion.
I mean, if that's your thing, go for it.
If that's what's going to finally work for you guys, yeah, go for it. Can't hurt to try, experiment. Okay. So, but just, think about what will make your partner feel safe and loved during this conversation.
One of the things that we do in every single interview that we have is we ask how the person grew up financially, what they learned from their parents, good or bad, and how that influenced their life. And this is a great way to broach this topic, because it will likely be something new for your partner to learn about you, and will also help them understand the context of how you grew up and why you are the way you are. And for me, this was part of my conversation with Britta when we were becoming serious. I talked about my parents retiring early, and I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to work really hard for 10 years. Then I'm going to stop working. That's my plan. And I wanted to make sure she was okay with that. And she was like, that's great.
Oh, that's great. Then you put a ring on it.
Yep.
Okay. Then the next tip that we talk about a lot, we have entire episodes on this, is get all of your numbers together in one spreadsheet, on whether it's in a spreadsheet written down on a piece of paper, whatever works for you initially. And know where you and your partner stand, even if you guys have separate finances, right? Like, do it as an exercise and be like, hey, I want to do this thing where we where we just document our net worth and see where we're at. We see what all of our assets are. We see what all our liabilities are. And then we see the resulting net worth. And again, it's not about what's good or bad. Be like, look, there's no good or bad. It's about making progress. I just want to, what gets measured gets better. And I want to have a point in time that we know where we're at, so we can have fun tracking our progress over time and improving our net worth. And won't that be a fun thing to look at and then track as a couple? And I think that exercise of even kind of putting all that stuff down could be a good exercise to do. Again, all the things we just said of like, don't be judgmental. This isn't about saying, oh, why do you have this debt or any of that. It's just a factual exercise to put everything on paper.
And tracking for the sake of tracking is not going to be a long-term solution. So in order for that to be effective, you also need to create goals for yourself individually and as a couple, and then create plans to achieve those goals together. And so your monthly or quarterly or biannual meetings where you are reviewing finances in your net worth chart and your expense trackers, talk about your goals and talk about how well you are achieving them and where you need to make some changes. And that quickly helps build momentum and trust with each other.
So as you're creating those plans, Mike, a good thing to do is talk about the areas of spending that you want to each prioritize, right? It's not all categories, but it's, hey, let's each get a couple of categories that we kind of like, we know are important. Like, Mike, your wife's a big swimmer, and I'm sure she buys different swimming gear and bathing suits and stuff. And you like to buy nerdy model airplane stuff, right?
Yes, that's one of them. Yes.
Right. But so there should be, it's fair. Now there can't be like 100 categories like that, but there can be some spending categories that you each want to prioritize. So maybe one of you is like really into clothing or something. But whatever it is, it's the idea of, give some leeway and budget out those things, and put them into your goals. I think another thing is, while you're having all of these conversations and creating goals and creating plans and looking at your net worth and starting to broach these topics and discussions, try to make it fun, right? Try to build in some rewards. Perhaps each month when you do a finance check-in with each other, which we suggest you doing for what it's worth, maybe you do it over takeout from your favorite restaurant, right? Assuming that fits into your money goals. Set up some rewards for you as a couple when you meet certain financial goals. So maybe it's that, you go on a vacation together if you hit your budget 6 months in a row, or you've reached some debt payoff target you want to get to. But, it's not a competition, but like make it fun and build in some rewards.
So that's important. Don't make it a competition. But our next bullet is perhaps make it a competition and see if that inspires them. So if doing a budget tracking exercise to see who can spend the least amount of money or who can generate the highest return in an investment, kind of the stuff you and I, Maggie, have done over time, that might work for your relationship. And so don't be afraid to try it.
Yeah, if you guys like, if your partner loves a good competition, like get them motivated with that. If your partner hates competition, don't do this.
Don't do it.
Clearly, right? Customize your approach to knowing what works for your partner. And on that angle, another tip is find the angle that they are interested in and lean into that, even if it's a little bit different than where you might have headed. Like all relationships are compromise at times, right? So you may have a way you wanted to do it. You may want to use the debt snowball method. But then your partner gets really excited about the inverted snowball snowplow method that they heard on Friends and Fire. That's funny if you've listened to that episode that was recent. Either way, like if you need to kind of lean into what they're getting excited about, go for it, right? So maybe they've now gotten on a kick to become debt free, right? And they haven't in any way, they don't care about early retirement. That's weird to them and that's un-American or whatever. That's okay. Just take the initial win of saying that they're now motivated to get debt free. Take it one step at a time. I will bet you a lot of this stuff is addictive, right? As you get better at one thing financially and start to learn other tactics and approaches, it really can become very, what's the word? Addictive, or what's the word? I don't know. You want more and more of it is my point.
Addictive.
Yeah, addictive.
The next point is gather a list of materials, either books or podcasts or TV shows that you can enjoy together. So I think back to our interview with The Price of Avocado Toast, where they listened to Dave Ramsey's book on a road trip. That is a great way to both hear the same material and have an opportunity to discuss it in real time.
I watched the Playing with Fire documentary with my husband, and it got him much more excited about this. And he was, we were already like financially had many of the same goals, but he was less familiar with early retirement. And that got him really fired up and kind of even more motivated. The Money on the Table series that Rich and Regular does on YouTube, it's a really great thing to watch as a couple because it's another couple talking about money and they didn't always agree on money. So you kind of see them like joking and bantering about some of their stories of when they first met and the conversations that they had about money. And so I think consuming content, watching other couples go on this journey together, but two things, consuming content as a couple, right? So saying, hey, we're both going to listen to the same book. And if there isn't a time when you can conveniently do that, say we're going to listen to it at the same time, right? You listen to it on your commute, I'm going to listen to it on my commute. At the end of the day, we're going to talk about it. I think that can be really powerful to consume the same content. The other thing that can be powerful is watching other couples talk about money, because it can be very disarming to watch other couples talk about something. And then it can like open it up for you guys to kind of say, like, oh, look, not everyone sees eye to eye, and people, come along on this journey. And in Money on the Table and on Playing with Fire, they both have couples where not all partners are on the same page in the beginning, but they do eventually get to a common ground and common goals and a common journey. And I'm sure there's a ton of other content out there that has similar approaches, but I think people seeing it, a partner who is less inclined to want to talk about money, sometimes depending on the health of your relationship, they don't want to hear it from their spouse. And I think them hearing it from other people that are complete strangers and that, they don't know, can often open up the conversation in a way that's much better than how you could open it up with them. And not in all relationships, but in some, it could be another avenue to explore.
So if you find a podcast episode that you like, or an article that really resonates with you, or even someone that you both know that is very well versed in a certain topic that you think your partner might be interested in, send that over to them and let them, you don't need to consume the material at the same time. Let them do it on their own terms, at their own speed. And maybe that will work. And we hear this a lot, that a lot of dual fire journeys started with one partner sending the other an article.
And then the last one is, if you need to call in a professional at some point, that could be okay. There may get to, and I'll clarify what I mean by professional. There may be a point where you just need help from somebody else. And it could be that you need to go to a therapist together, because if you guys can't have a polite, respectful conversation, even about something that your partner doesn't want to talk about, which could be money. If they can't still like listen to you and empathize and at least, like thoughtfully and respectfully share back their views on something, that's a much bigger problem in a relationship. And Mike and I are not trained to help you in that area. So you should consider, like, therapy is a great thing. It's a good, of all the things you can spend your money on, it's a great investment. And there could be times where you need to go talk to a therapist. There could just be times where you need to go consult with a money coach, not a financial planner. We have a whole episode on why we don't recommend working with most types of financial planners. But typically what someone would call like a financial coach or a money coach would be very good and adept and charge you on an hourly rate, just like a therapist, at helping you to talk and work through some of these money topics. So I don't think you need to spend money on something like this, but if it gets to the point in your relationship where you guys can't work it out yourselves and you're not making meaningful progress and your partner was open to, hearing from someone else, it certainly could be a reasonable, kind of last step to say, hey, let's bring in some help in this area. And you could call Mike and I, perhaps. We can come and stage an intervention if you'd like.
Leave us a voicemail. We'll provide a response.
So I hope we have covered the initial inquiry or the initial message we got on Instagram, right? In terms of just giving, I understand that this person's partner, they don't see eye to eye on everything. But I think if they did start to have and go through some of the tactics that we talked about, like really talking about your life goals. And she gave this example of he wants to buy a house that's a lot more expensive. That decision right there is going to impact how long they have to work, what things they can afford in the future. And, just the idea of living paycheck to paycheck versus the idea of having a really healthy cushion fund, or a healthy emergency fund. And so, having a lot of those discussions, I think will get this person to be able to get to a better place in these discussions with their partner. So I hope this is helpful. I know we had some other questions. I think we've answered like how to discuss what each person's values are if they're not the same. Again, all the things we went through in the first few approaches and tactics there. Again, best practices on managing money together. A lot of the stuff we covered really does speak to that, right? Of having open conversation, being able to, track things together. Like, even if you have separate finances, which my husband and I have, Mike and his wife have combined finances. We have separate finances. We still have 100% transparent finances. We fully know what the situation is across both of our finances and we talk openly about it. So really the best practices are having open communication, and full transparency with your partner regarding money and talking about your goals and really understanding everybody's why. I think I said this in the beginning, but the last question about someone's partner's parents and looming debt, I need more details on that. And so we'll handle that one offline and try to give some thoughts to that person. But I really appreciate you all, sharing this topic and just this being an area that people, want to talk about more. Because I do think it's probably a pretty common area that people could use some help and advice in. So let's get to our top 3 takeaways, Mike.
Before we do that, Maggie, I would like to address one specific part of our listeners' question.
Okay.
So a lot of this was centered around the home buying decision. And husband wants to spend more to buy in an area where he thinks the value of the homes is growing faster. She wants to buy something that's less expensive and is concerned about taxes and making it more affordable. What I would say to this, and we talked about a bunch on this show, buying a home is a lifestyle choice, not an investment choice. So where do you want to live that would make you the happiest? Is it in the more expensive area or is it the less expensive area? Forget the taxes, forget the future value of the home. Think about where you will be happiest as a couple and as a family and make your decision that way. All right. Top 3 takeaways, Maggie.
Okay. Number 1, it is incredibly important to discuss money with your partner. It is not a topic you can or should avoid.
Number 2, start by getting your own house in order. And sometimes that can be contagious and the easiest path for everyone.
Number 3, when you approach the topic with your partner, be very thoughtful with your approach. Ask questions, listen, don't judge. Pick a few things from our list that you think would be most appropriate for your situation. And don't be afraid to jump in and just get started.
All right. Thanks everybody for listening. If you've been challenged or inspired by what you've heard, please rate and review the show. You can also subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode.
If you have any thoughts or questions, we always love to hear from you, and you can leave us a voicemail or you can text us at 404-981-3370 or hit us up on Instagram.
All right. Thanks, Maggie. This was fun.
Yeah. Always like these topics. Bye, Mike.
Bye.